Welcome to Voices Uniting Everyone. I'm your host, Larry Davis. Austin Community College works to love all our students to success through our culture of care and purpose, which starts in the classroom with our faculty members, but also in the students' overall experience at the college. We want them to feel safe and welcome, connected, and supported so they can accomplish their higher education goals toward a sustainable and rewarding career. Today, we have a professor who teaches U.S. and Mexican American history at ACC. He joined the college in the summer of 2020 and was named the director of El Centro, ACC's Latin American Cultural Center, located at the Riverside campus. He first visited Austin in 2012 to conduct research at the Nettie Lee Benson Library at the University of Texas and immediately fell in love with our city. Dr. Gary Moreno earned his doctorate in Latin American history from the University of Oklahoma. He is an expert on Mexican men's fashion, specializing in the history of the charro suit. He hopes to publish his research with UT Press in the coming years. He previously taught at Rose State Community College near Oklahoma City. Dr. Moreno, Gary, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Larry. Thank you for inviting me on.
Well, it's an honor and a privilege. Gary, before we dive into our belonging discussion, let's hear a bit about your teaching philosophy, why you picked history as your focus as an academic, and what about it excites you?
History is complex. It's more complex than people would believe or understand. And so it's my job as an instructor to make sure that everybody sees themselves reflected in the history that is being taught, right? Sometimes, by everyone, I mean, women, I mean, African Americans, I mean, Native Americans. Those are oftentimes narratives that are very hard to come by in history.
True.
And you have to do a lot of digging to get there, right? And so that's what I strive to do. I strive for all of my students to feel themselves a part of the story, so that they know that, this is their history as well. And so along with that, I also do a lot of visual and auditory components to my lectures. There's a lot of cinema. My students know that there's a lot of cinema clips that I like to play for them, and a lot of music. And by doing that, I simply want to engage the various different learning styles that people have. I'm a really visual learner. And so that's why I have a lot of movie clips in there, right? There's people that, musicians or people who are just really well at capturing information through auditory means. And that's why we have some of the music. So that's what I really strive to do. Make sure that everybody sees themselves in the story and also make sure that we're engaging the students in their particular learning style.
That's great, Gary. Being seen is important. It's an important element of belonging, and of course, customizing your approach so that every student's need is met. Thank you for such an amazing philosophy. So, what brought you to Austin Community College, and why teach at a community college?
I really like teaching working class students. I come from a working class immigrant background. Immigrants do come from working class. Sometimes those things tend to be separated, but yes, they are together. And so I love to teach students that, have various different jobs. I always had 2 or 3 jobs when I was in college, and I like that my students have 2 or 3. I don't like that they have 2 or 3 jobs, but, I understand that they do, and that sometimes it's necessary, and so there's a lot of different situations that working class students are dealing with, and so I find that very rewarding to work with them and to kind of accommodate some of those things that perhaps at a higher institution or perhaps a tier 1 institution might not be so they might not be so forgiving in certain situations, right?
Right.
And I think also the rewards with community college are great. It's always awesome to see our students go on to those higher institutions like UT. I always love to see our students move on as well,
Do you have a favorite class and why?
I love teaching U.S. history. I really do. That's how I kind of got started. I remember as a very young kid being really attracted to the story of George Washington at Valley Forge and the suffering of all the soldiers at Valley Forge, And so I have a love for American history. But really, what I love to do here at Austin Community College, and I've been really blessed kind of in being given the class of Mexican American history. And that's incorporating, some elements of U.S. history in there as well, a lot of elements of U.S. history,
Right.
but also a lot of elements of Mexican history, and also a lot of elements of Caribbean history, because, these are regions that are connected. And so I try to show my students that how interconnected we are, not just with Mexican Americans, but Cuban Americans and, Dominican Americans, and the experiences are very similar when you look at Latin America. So when you make a comparison to those places, let's take a look at the Cuban Americans in Florida, right? And compare that to the Mexican Americans in, California and Texas, right? There's a lot of comparison to be done there. So I really enjoyed that class.
That's interesting, because the more we look at the differences, quite frankly, the more we can find similarities and common interests. What are some things you do to ensure that your students feel welcomed, loved, motivated to succeed in your class from semester to semester?
Well, there's various different things that I do. One of the things that I do is it's called the soft deadline policy. As knowing that we, cater mainly to working class students, I understand that a lot of our students are going to have things that come up, right? And
Right.
As often happens, such as life. And so they're not required to send me an email telling me that they missed an assignment, because I feel like that can also be very exposing to certain students.
Right. That's
And
true.
that they can turn in any assignment at any time late without any points being taken away. I think a lot of students get demoralized when they have to make up work and they know that, oh, I can only score like 70%, or I can only capture a certain amount of points because I've already been penalized, right? It almost prevents students from actually attempting anything when they fall behind. So the soft deadline policy is kind of meant to do away with that anxiety for students.
That's a great approach, soft deadline. I hope some other professors are hearing that. What are some other changes or adjustments that you've made to your classroom or coursework or the approach of teaching that makes every student feel welcome, ready to learn and to succeed?
Oh man, there's so many. There's a lot of choice in my class, I have to say. It's almost kind of like build your own adventure. I allow my students to choose a lot of the questions that they can answer and choose the topics that they can write essays over. So it really, if you come to my class and if you're only paying attention half the time, I think you still have enough information to pass the class, right? If you want to focus just on women, that's cool. You can probably answer most questions that are geared towards that. Or if you want to focus on Native Americans, there's a whole set of questions that students can access on that. So it's kind of like, what interests you in this class? And I think that allows for students to be more engaged with the material, right? Because they choose, like, I like this, and this is what I want to write about, and this is what I want to take notes on. So,
how have you seen those changes reflected in your students' outcomes in your classes?
Good. I mean, students, one of the projects that I have is called the Source Review Project, and that I give them a list of like books, monographs that they can choose based on whatever topic they like. And so that's how that works out. And, students choose a book that they want, and so I feel like they are more engaged with that book if they have chosen it themselves and if it's something that interests them. That's how that plays out for the most part. And I think that it ends up with better grades, better outcomes for the students. If they're interested in what they're learning in terms of history, then they're going to give me a better product in the end.
That's great to hear, Gary. Now, what have you observed over the years teaching our very diverse student population? Are there any consistent areas of success or struggles that you see as a faculty member with students at ACC?
Let's talk about the struggles, because the struggles they're intense for our students. Of course, we're in Austin, and one of the things that I consistently see with our students is food insecurity. Right? There's a lot of programs around the campus in which food resources are provided to the students, whether it's like what we have at Riverside, a kind of farmer's market.
Yep.
or some of the food pantries that have been opening up around campus. I think those are kind of an attempt to deal with that issue. A lot of my students are also dealing with housing insecurity, and I see that all the time in various different forms, and I know students that have been on the streets, and I'm sure a lot of our professors know students that our students are unhoused. And that's, I think a problem across the country, but very particular here to Austin as well. And perhaps third most struggles that I see with our students is mental health issues. Some of these come out of the pandemic and the isolation from that era. And some of it's just society as a whole. I think, we're dealing with a lot of mental health issues. And I see a lot of students out there with undiagnosed and untreated mental health concerns. And so I think it's just getting some resources to our students in the right way.
In a few seconds or less, can you tell us just a little bit more about El Centro? Because that sounds like a really special place.
Yes, El Centro, the Latin American Cultural Center. I've been the director there now going on 4 years. It's a great place. It's for anybody who has an interest in Latin American culture, right? You don't have to be Latino, Latina. Anybody with an interest in Latin American culture is welcome at El Centro. And so we just kind of provide the resources that allow people to access that culture, right? Whether it be film, whether it be some of the lectures. We bring in a lot of lectures and have talks. We have regular programming that we call cafecito con, a little coffee with. It's an expression that a lot of Latin Americans use, right? And it's almost kind of like you're spilling the tea. And you're getting together over coffee and you're discussing things. And so we try to bring in scholars or people from the community that have interesting stories for our students. We also put together Cine at El Centro, which is a cinema program that we do. We usually choose like 4 or 5 films every year that we like to highlight, and usually they're synced up with some kind of celebration or some kind of Heritage Month. And then our perhaps most popular thing that we have at El Centro is the El Centro Book Club. And so the El Centro Book Club, I think, is a great success story at the college. It grows every year. We just started, the first year we did it about 2 years ago, it was just a handful of people. But now we're getting as much as 200 people interested in what we're doing. That doesn't mean that everybody shows up to the book club, right? But it's growing because now we're getting support from the library. And so now the El Centro Book Club is actually going to be at a lot of different campuses through the library services there. And so, the El Centro Book Club gives our students and faculty or staff, if they're interested, the book that we have selected for that month for free. And so we all come together, we all read it, and see what we can learn.
That's amazing. Wow. Well, we'll take a short break, but be right back. Stay with us for our next guest, a student from Dr. Moreno's class.
Ascender es familia.
Ascender significa comunidad y cultura.
Ascender is having people who have your back.
Ascender is life-changing opportunity.
Ascender is a year-long free academic transfer mentor program at ACC dedicated to empowering students. Ascender empodera a los estudiantes. As an Ascender student, you are offered smaller class sizes, classes that are transferable to universities, personalized mentoring, engaging cultural and academic events, and a designated advisor who will help you navigate your first year of college.
The best thing about being a mentor is the mentees. Absolutely.
The best thing of being a mentor is giving back what you receive.
It provides students, regardless of their background, regardless of anything that they carry with them that they might perceive as a negative, and that helps them turn that into a positive.
You will not be alone. You will not sink or swim. You'll have opportunities to both learn your content and curriculum, but also get to know your fellow students.
Ascender es un programa inclusivo, open to everyone regardless of major, age, race, ethnicity, and gender. Anyone can join. Todos son bienvenidos.
Yo decidí ser parte de Ascender porque quería empezar con el pie correcto.
I joined Ascender because I want to be part of a community that really taught me about the opportunities around me and as well give me lessons about school and life.
Ascender is very special because of the people in it and the people behind it. They really make it feel very warm, welcoming, and like a true family.
It really is like a big family. I'm not super close to mine, so like having peers and teachers and staff just without even knowing them just reach out to me, it was a really good experience.
It makes starting a lot easier, which is usually the hardest step.
Come join our familia.
Join Ascender today.
Once an ascender,
It's always an ascender.
Join us in this
Today.
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 Join our familia today. Check out austincc.edu/ascender for more information.
Welcome back to Voices Uniting Everyone with my guest, Dr. Gary Moreno, and now his student, April Garcia, joining us from the Riverside campus where she is studying studio art and Mexican American studies. Thanks for joining our show today, April.
Thank you for having me.
Tell us a little bit about why you came to ACC for college and how long you've been here.
Yeah, I'm studying studio art currently, finishing up my associate's degree in that. And then I recently took on a double major with Mexican American Studies, really looking for more like cultural connection and historical, you know, Mexican history, yeah, information for myself. Yeah.
Well, April, we're delighted you're here.
Thank you.
Tell us what you're hoping to do when you graduate. What's your career path or plan?
After, once I graduate with my studio art associate's degree, I'd like to go to UT and study Mexican American Studies and Latin Studies. And then eventually also, I'm really interested in museum studies as well, so maybe an MFA in museum studies.
Well, I have no doubt you're going to be very successful as you go through that journey. Now, describe for us the Riverbat student experience you've had here at ACC and how you found a sense of belonging and purpose in and outside the classroom.
You know, when I started my studio art journey, I was definitely, you know, trying to figure out what medium I was really interested in and what medium spoke to me, and that became sculpture. But as I've come a lot further down this journey in studio art, I was needing more cultural context, and so that's why I decided to take on Mexican American Studies as a second major, because I felt like I was needing that connection to be a part of my art making as well.
Great. Let me ask you this. What are we doing well as a college, and what still needs some work and improvement?
I mean, I feel like I've really found myself as a student here going through my studio arts and now my Mexican American Studies. I feel like I think like Dr. Moreno's course was really just helpful to me just on a soul level, just, you know, all of that historical context that I was really missing. But I feel like, you know, I definitely see, you know, affordable housing being something that I think ACC should definitely look into. I think we have a really great golf course over at Riverside
Yes, we do.
that we could possibly utilize as affordable housing, possibly. So I think we're, you know, ACC is doing really a lot of great things. The pantry, the mental health counseling, there's so many great programs for ACC students here, and I just see this great, you know, a lot of great support for students. But, you know, there's that pocket of like affordable housing that's a big issue here in, you know, in Austin with inflation and just, it's expensive.
It is expensive.
You're absolutely right, April. Now, April, what are some of the things that you've experienced and enjoyed at ACC's Latin American Cultural Center, and how helpful has it been as a resource or space to you?
I personally really enjoyed, you know, when I was taking Dr. Moreno's courses, the Mexican American history courses, what I really noticed and appreciated was how he engaged the community and brought, you know, speakers in to connect with the students there, creating panel discussions. I thought that was like very exciting and just nice opportunity and you know, space for everybody to connect and learn, and I don't know, that was something that I really enjoyed a lot about Dr. Moreno's work.
But you've also used the library that we have, the Tijerina collection, right?
Yep.
You were one of the first students actually to utilize that collection for the project that you had. April is also doing an art project for us at El Centro. She's going to do some soft sculptures in her style that she does, that you've gotten an award for in the past. She's going to do some soft sculptures for us for Day of the Dead. So when we put up our altar, our ofrenda, you know, we'll bring out April's sculptures, and you know, it's going to be a whole thing. So we're looking forward to seeing those.
I'm excited.
April, you're holding out on us. See, if it wasn't for Gary, you wouldn't have known you got an award for some of the outstanding work you're doing. Excellent, excellent. So what else has enhanced your experience and success as a college student?
You know, I think I really, when I, you know, decided to take Dr. Moreno's courses, I was really searching for personal questions about my culture, about, you know, Texas Mexican history, and just, you know, kind of filling in these spots that were kind of just missing, you know. For me, you know, I can't say enough how much I really appreciated Dr. Moreno's work, you know, the visual work that he puts into his lectures, the very specific stuff that he puts into his lectures. For me, that was so empowering to take in all that information and just kind of feel like I could see this future in learning more about my culture, and just, I don't know, it's been very just empowering.
That's great. That's great. Truly, you've benefited greatly from Gary's instruction and from some of the other marvelous resources that you've referenced earlier. So on the flip side, what about barriers or challenges that you faced as a student while here at ACC?
I mean, I think any challenges were probably more personal, you know, coming back to school. I had, you know, started and then paused and then came back, and so I was more kind of maybe nervous about just kind of coming back after the big pause from, you know, becoming a mother. So I think, you know, it's more personal, I think, barriers. And I think once you kind of become a part of the community and you start attending, you know, talks and lectures, those barriers start to kind of come down, and you start to kind of see like the real beauty of like what ACC is about, you know, the connection and the community and stuff like that. So
let's have some more fun about the history class. So April, what was fun, different, and interesting about the history class you took with Gary?
Yeah, I really found Dr. Moreno's lectures very interesting and captivating. The visuals was a really big thing for me because I'm a visual artist, and I learn really well that way. And so, you know, his lectures are just really great in what he provides, you know, the information to his students. But along with that, just I think the visuals were really great for me too. I just enjoyed kind of sitting in class and listening and looking at the slides and stuff like that. So, but yeah, I think with his lectures, and then also his you know, people that he brings in to kind of connect with the students, I think that's what really made it such a great course for me.
A lot of those visuals are geared towards like fashion, right? and you know, there'd be days in lecture where I would be lecturing, and I would almost lecture particularly to you because I knew you understood what I was talking about. You know, when I was talking about clothing with your background in visual arts. And so I think, you know, that's a big component of it, I think.
I was really impressed when he was talking about himself, the first, you know, introductions of the course, and he mentioned that he was a fashion historian, and I just like perked up. I was just like, oh my goodness, like this guy is really cool. I love fashion, and I love just time period work, you know, in films and stuff like that. So I think every time you brought up any kind of like fashion stuff, it was just very interesting to me, and yeah, so
Yeah,
it
I
was
think
great.
we geeked out about costumes a lot.
A lot.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to seeing Gary's book when he has it produced. And both of you just ended up answering a couple of other questions I was going to ask you. I was going to ask you, Gary, how she was as a student in your class, and you just described it.
I love
and then you talked about the project or assignment of her doing some sculpture work in your course as well.
No, it was great to have April in the class. I think just non-traditional students are amazing because they're not as shy as traditional students,
Right,
you know.
that's
So
true.
that's oftentimes why I was looking directly at you, because I was getting a bunch of blank stares from everybody, you know.
Yeah,
So,
and like the public art, the mural lectures that you have, I think we were always kind of like going back and forth. You're like, oh, have you seen that one? I was like, no, I haven't seen that one.
Yeah,
it was kind of always going back and forth.
we knew
Yeah.
some of the same artists.
Yeah.
And yeah.
How would you both say, as faculty and staff and students, how can we continue to improve upon making ACC a place that everyone truly belongs, feels valued, supported, connected, and accepted? Either one of you.
Well, I definitely agree with Dr. Moreno when it comes to the mental health, and we do live in a very isolated world, you know, with our technology and coming out of COVID, and just we have these new kind of isolated ways about us. And so I think, you know, activating spaces at the campuses that give information about what we have available to our students when it comes to mental health and taking care of each other and connecting with each other, creating space where we're connecting and enjoying each other and being a community.
And, you know, I'm going to similarly take your point and kind of raise it up here, because I believe in what you said. You know, I think we need to be more creative as a college, and when we think about our students' housing issues, right? Like you mentioned that plot of land that we have over at the Riverside, right? Yeah, there's, you know, I know that, you know, our students are now getting free tuition if they, you know, are coming from Austin schools. And that's supposed to alleviate some of those things, but it's not going to solve it. And so I just want the college to kind of approach those housing issues just with an open mind.
Well, thank you, Professor Moreno and April, for joining us on Voices Uniting Everyone today. I loved learning from both of you today. I'm sure our audience did too. We appreciate you coming on the show and sharing your experience and your insights. Well, that wraps our show for today. To our viewers, thanks for joining us. To learn more about the purpose and belonging work ACC is doing to help our students have a great experience and ensure they cross the finish line, visit austincc.edu/belonging. And to explore future events and happenings with Dr. Moreno at El Centro at ACC Riverside, check out austincc.edu/El Centro. This show is about how we can change our world one student at a time, and we hope you find some inspiration in this. We invite you to get involved and engaged in this important work for our community. We'll see you next time on Voices Uniting Everyone, only on ACC TV.